Welcome to Africa Mafia Stories, where loyalty is currency, power has a price, and every city hides a secret. Today's story is based in Namibia, but before the story begins, tell me this. If you could visit any African country, where would you go and why? Enjoy the story. Last time I saw him, he was standing on a broken pier like the ocean had been waiting for him. The wind was violent that morning, slapping salt against the dusted railings and dragging the smell of fish, diesel, and old secrets across the harbor. My name is Amara Dlamini, and before I fell in love with the man people called the King of the Coast, I believed smuggling was just crime with better boats. I did not yet understand what desperation could build, what grief could harden, or what power looked like when it dressed itself up as protection. I had come to the coast to investigate illegal fishing routes and missing cargo records. That was the official reason anyway, the kind you write down for editors and border officers. The real reason was more personal. My older brother, Temba, had vanished 6 months earlier after taking a logistics job in the port city of Nakala. The company said he quit. The police said adults disappeared every day. My mother said nothing at all after the third week. Silence is what grief becomes when it gets tired of being loud. I was a journalist by profession and stubborn by inheritance, so I took an assignment no one else wanted and followed my brother's last known route to the sea. The port city was beautiful in the careless way dangerous places sometimes are. Blue water, bright boats, gulls crying overhead, women selling grilled cassava at the roadside, children playing football in alleys that smelled of tide water and engine grease. But beauty had cracks here. Ships came in half-documented. Containers moved at strange hours. Men with clean shoes got very rich from very dirty cargo. Everyone knew it. No one said it plainly. The harbor clerk I first bribed with cigarettes and bad coffee gave me one useful warning before he pretended not to know anything else. If you are asking about missing cargo, he said, you are really asking about him. Who is him? I asked. He looked at the water before answering, as if the tide itself might be listening. Jabari. The name moved through the port like a current, quiet, strong, dangerous if you misjudged it. People said Jabari ran routes no customs officer could map properly. They said he controlled half the small boats that moved up and down that stretch of coast. They said he was a smuggler, a protector, a criminal, a patriot, depending on who was speaking and who was listening. They also said the fishing villages along the outer shore trusted him more than they trusted the police. That interested me more than the rest. Criminals like to be feared. Men who are also trusted are something else entirely. I found him 2 days later at the old pier beyond the commercial docks. I had been following a trail of night manifests, falsified fuel logs, and fishermen who went quite too quickly whenever I asked the right questions. The pier was half broken, used mostly by smaller boats that preferred not to be recorded. He stood alone near the end of it all, tall and still, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a coil of rope like it belonged there. He was not dressed like a king. Dark shirt, worn boots, faded trousers, sleeves rolled carelessly. But power is not always visible in luxury. Sometimes it sits in the way the world rearranges itself around a person. 2 dog hands passed him and lowered their eyes without being told. He noticed me before I reached him. Journalists usually ask permission before photographing private dogs, he said without turning. His voice was calm and deep and irritatingly unhurried. I wasn't photographing the dog, I said. He looked at me then. And what were you photographing? The honest answer would have been you. Instead, I said a root. One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, not quite dismissal. You should be careful with routes, he said. They tend to lead people somewhere. There are men who flirt as if they invented danger. He was not one of them. He spoke like a man issuing a fact and letting you decide whether to survive it. You're Jabari, I said. He did not confirm it. He did not deny it. He just watched me with eyes too steady to belong to anyone harmless. And you are asking questions that will make people nervous, he replied. My brother disappeared here. It was the first true thing I had given him, and it changed the air between us immediately. Something in his face tightened. Not guilt. Recognition, maybe, or irritation that pain had entered a conversation he preferred to keep strategic. What was his name, he asked. Themba Dlamini. The silence that followed was not random. He knew the name. You should leave the port, he said. That was not the answer I wanted, and therefore the one most likely to matter. You know something. He looked past me to the road above the pier, where a white truck had just slowed for half a second too long. I know enough to tell you this, he said quietly. If your brother disappeared because he saw the wrong cargo, then asking louder questions won't bring him back. I stepped closer, angry now. Then what will? His answer came like a blade turned flat, surviving long enough to ask the right people. Then he walked past me, and every man on that pier suddenly remembered how busy he was. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning. I spent the next week chasing paperwork by day and rumors by night. My editor thought I was writing a corruption piece. In reality, I was building a map of small betrayals, disappeared invoices, vessel codes that changed by hour, and fishermen paid to forget. Jabari appeared at the edges of all of it without ever directly being named. He owned no company on paper. He had no listed office, yet entire sections of the harbour bent around his existence. Then came the first time he saved me. It happened in broad daylight, which is how arrogance usually moves when it thinks no one will challenge it. I had just come out of a customs warehouse with copies of cargo logs tucked inside my bag when two men stepped into my path. They were dressed too well for labour and too casually for police. One smiled like he had rehearsed it. You've been asking after the wrong shipments, he said. Then they are probably the right ones, I answered. The slap came so fast I only felt the sting after my head turned. I heard footsteps before I saw him. Jabari did not shout. He did not posture. He simply stepped between me and the man with the kind of calm that made violence feel inevitable. One of the men laughed nervously. This has nothing to do with you. Jabari looked at the hand that had struck me, then at the man attached to it. It does now, he said. The fight was short and ugly in the way real ones usually are. No spinning heroics, no speeches. One man went down after Jabari drove his elbow into his throat. The other took one look at the first and reconsidered his life choices. When it was over, he picked up my bag from the ground and handed it back to me like we had merely dropped a scarf in the wind. You don't listen well, he said. You don't explain well, I replied, though my voice came out less steady than I wanted. He studied the mark already rising on my cheek. His jaw tightened. Come with me, he said. That should have sounded like a threat. Somehow, it sounded like the only practical thing left. He took me not to a hideout of luxury, but to a weathered house above the outer shore where the fishing village began. Children were playing in the sand outside. An old woman was cleaning snapper at a basin. Two teenage boys mending a net greeted him with the ease of family. That confused me more than the fight had. Criminal kings were not supposed to be trusted by grandmothers. Inside, the house was simple and cool. Open windows, wooden table, salt-stiff curtains. No gold-plated villain furniture, which felt frankly unfair to my assumptions. He handed me a cloth and a bowl of water. You should stop expecting me to disappear every time I ask a question, I said, while pressing the cloth to my face. You should stop asking them in rooms full of men who sell information by the kilo, he said. I lowered the cloth. Who were they? He leaned one shoulder against the wall, arms folded. They work for Salim. The name meant nothing to me. He saw that. Salim Njoroge controls the inland route, he said. Timber, fuel, stolen goods, people when the money is bad enough. He wants the coast too. And you're in his way. His eyes held mine. Usually. There are moments when attraction begins not with charm but with competence, with a sense that if the room catches fire, one person will know where the door is. Jabari was made of those moments. That frightened me more than his reputation. Over the next few days, he started appearing whenever my investigation reached the edges of his world. Sometimes he intercepted me before I walked into a bad room. Sometimes he sent a village boy with a message that a contact has suddenly become unavailable. Once, he sent food to my guest house after learning I had skipped lunch, which annoyed me because it suggested he was observing me closely enough to notice. I confronted him about that on the shore one evening, while fishermen pulled in lost nets under a violet sky. "Do you make a habit of monitoring women you barely know?" I asked. He looked genuinely thoughtful. "Only the ones walking into trafficking routes with a notebook." I should not have laughed. I did. It changed something between us. Not much, just enough to let warmth into a place previously occupied only by strategy. The truth about him came in pieces. He had been born in the fishing village, the eldest son of a boat mechanic and a schoolteacher. His father drowned during a storm, after the Coast Guard ignored distress calls to chase a different vessel with bitter bribes attached. His mother spent 3 years petitioning officials who kept misplacing paperwork, while foreign trawlers stripped village waters bare. By 21, Jabari had learned what every port city teaches eventually: law exists, but not evenly. So he built something parallel to it. At first it was practical. Night fuel runs for fishermen squeezed by taxes, off-book engine parts. Medicine moved faster than customs could delay it. Then came protected routes, guarded boats, information networks, and finally a coastline that answered to him before it answered to the state. He smuggled, yes, but he also paid widows, fixed outboard motors, funded school roofs, and made sure certain kinds of men did not take certain kinds of girls from the villages. That did not make him clean. It made him impossible. People are easier to judge when they stay one thing. Jabari refused. The first time I told him about timber properly, we were on his boat at dawn, following a line of marker buoys through shallow water that flashed silver under the rising sun. I had not meant to speak. Some stories drag themselves out when the world is too quiet to resist them. My brother was the careful one, I said. I was the loud one. He was always the one cleaning up after my courage got stupid. Jabari kept his eyes on the water, and now you are here cleaning up after his. That was cruelly accurate. He wanted money, I said. Our mother was getting sick. He said port work paid well. Then he called less, then not at all. Jabari was quiet long enough that I thought he would leave it there. Instead he said, "I remember him." My entire body went still. "You knew him?" He worked 2 transfers near the bonded yards. Smart, watchful, too honest for the men around him. "Why didn't you say this before?" His answer became flat. "Because if I had said it that first day you met me, you would have followed me deeper before you understood the cost." That angered me, but only because part of me knew he was right. "What happened to him?" I asked. Jabari finally looked at me, and the sorrow in his face was so unguarded it hurt to receive. He saw a transfer he should not have seen, human cargo, mislabeled as mechanical stock. Salim was trying to expand inland movement through the commercial yard. The water around us seemed to tilt. "Did he die?" Jabari's jaw clenched. "I don't know. Not knowing is a cruelty all its own. Death closes one door. Uncertainty leaves them all rattling." I turned away because if I looked at him any longer, I would either hit him or collapse into the sea. Instead, I asked, "And you've done nothing?" The moment the words left me, I regretted them. His expression closed like a storm door. "You think I keep lists of the people I fail?" he asked quietly. That was the first time I saw the damage under his control. Not guilt exactly, burden, the kind men carry when too many lives have started depending on their competence. We did not speak for the rest of the ride. That evening, I found him outside the boat shed after full dark, repairing a net by lantern light, because apparently even kings of the coast still did practical things with their hands. "I was unfair," I said. He did not look up. "You were grieving." "I was cruel." That made him pause. "Those are different things." I sat opposite him on an overturned crate. The lantern between us made his face look carved from shadow and patience. "What did you mean," I asked softly, "when you said you remember the people you fail?" He set the net down then, slow enough that I knew he was deciding whether I had earned the answer. "My sister was 16, he said. A recruiter promised factory work inland. She never made it to the factory. I found out too late. The night seemed to fold inward around us. That was the true engine beneath him then, not greed, not thrill, fury with a direction. That's why you built the roots, I said. He nodded once. If the law refuses to protect your people, you either become prey or you build your own teeth. It was not a moral defense, it was an explanation. Somehow, that made it stronger. Love does not always begin with softness. Sometimes it begins with understanding the shape of another person's wound. That night, I understood his. After that, everything between us became more dangerous because it became more honest. He stopped pretending I was just a journalist in over her head. I stopped pretending he was just a criminal with good cheekbones and a village fan club. We argued about ethics while sorting evidence. We shared tea on the seawall while pretending not to watch each other. He learned that I got reckless when I was close to answers. I learned that he went very still before doing something violent. He smiled more around me than he seemed to like. I slept less whenever he was absent too long. The first time he touched me with urgency, it was to move a strand of hair from my face after it got caught in an oil-stained ledger. He did it gently, then looked at his own hand as though it had betrayed him. "That was a mistake," he said. "Was it?" I asked. His voice dropped. "Yes, because now I am thinking about doing it again." That was the first time he kissed me. It happened in the records room, above the fish warehouse, while rain battered the roof and the whole city smelled like wet rope and salt. There was nothing theatrical about it, just hunger, restraint, and the unmistakable sense that we were stepping over a line neither of us would be able to redraw. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead briefly against mine and said the most inconveniently honest thing possible. "You should still not trust me completely." I answered, "That would be easier if you were easier to hate." He laughed then, low and surprised, and the sound stayed with me longer than the kiss did. The evidence finally aligned 3 nights later. Cargo logs, vessel switches, fuel discrepancies, inland manifests, and one name appearing underneath all of it like a stain, Salim. But there was more. A sealed transport ledger from the week timber disappeared, listed an unscheduled transfer through Warehouse 9. Destination, inland holding route. Escort, private. Jabari stared at the page for a long time. If your brother lived through the first movement, he could still be in one of Salim's interior compounds. Hope is a dangerous thing when you have already started grieving. It does not arrive gently, it claws. "We go now," I said. "No," he answered immediately. "We plan. Salim will expect panic." I should have listened. Instead, I made the worst decision of my adult life. I went alone to Warehouse 9 before dawn with a camera, a copied key card, and the kind of confidence grief wears when it has mistaken itself for courage. I got as far as the loading bay, then the lights came on. Salim was waiting. He was slimmer than I expected, elegantly dressed, with the polished manners of a man who likes blood as long as someone else cleaned it. He applauded once, softly. Journalists are so generous. They always bring themselves to the evidence eventually. 2 men took my arms before I could bolt. "Where's my brother?" I demanded, because when terror arrives, dignity often turns into noise. Salim came close enough for me to smell cardamom and expensive soap. Alive, last I heard, which means more than many can say. I hated the relief that went through me. He saw it. Men like him always do. "Jabari should have taught you patience," he said. That was when I understood this had never only been about cargo. This was about territory, about rival kingdoms built in the cracks left by governments and greed, and I had just become the most useful weapon one king could hold against another. He took me to the upper office above the warehouse floor and tied my wrists to a steel chair with insulting neatness. Then he poured himself tea. Truly, evil often has better table manners than it deserves. "You know what your problem is?" he asked. I did not answer. He seemed delighted anyway. "You believe Jabari was exceptional because he hurts for the right reasons," Salim said. "That is still hurting. It still makes him weak." He leaned back in the chair opposite me. Compassion is a leak in a ship. Charming. Fatal. I would have spat at him if my mouth had not gone dry. Jabari came just after sunrise. Of course he did. Men like him hear when the sea changes, and I had changed it badly. The first sign was the gunfire below. Not wild, controlled. Sharp bursts, men shouting, crates overturning. Salim smiled as though entertained. And here comes the weather. The office door burst open hard enough to splinter the frame. Jabari stood there breathing hard, shirt streaked with dust and sweat and someone else's blood, a gun in one hand and murder in his eyes. I had seen him angry before. This was different. This was what happened when control finally gave grief permission to become violent. "Let her go," he said. Salim stood slowly, almost bored. Then he drew a gun and pressed it to my neck so fast my breath caught. "There she is," he said softly. "The leak." The room froze. Even the men in the hallway seemed to understand this had become something personal and therefore more dangerous. "You built nothing," Jabari said, never taking his eyes off Salim. "You bought rot and called it power." Salim smiled. "And you built a kingdom for fishermen and widows. How noble. How stupid." His voice sharpened. "You could have taken the whole coast with me." Jabari's answer came low and lethal. "I'd rather drown." That was the moment I knew they had once tried to make each other into mirrors and failed. Salim and Jabari were not just rivals. They were two answers to the same question. What do you become when the world refuses to protect your people? Salim had chosen profit. Jabari had chosen loyalty. Both had become dangerous. Only one had remained human. Salim pressed the gun harder against my throat. "Drop it." Jabari lowered his weapon slowly. I wanted to scream at him not to. Instead, I saw what he was really doing, watching angles, counting breaths, waiting. Salim took one triumphant step forward. That was enough. Jabari moved. The shot fired into the ceiling as he slammed into Salim. The chair tipped sideways with me still in it, crashing onto the office floor hard enough to turn the world white for a second. Then everything became splinters, shouting, boots, rage. Jabari and Salim hit the glass office partition, shattered it, and went down into the corridor outside in a storm of broken panes. I twisted my wrists against the bindings until skin tore. Pain is sometimes just another kind of key. Below us, the warehouse had become a battlefield. Jabari's men were fighting through the loading lanes, while workers fled between stacked crates. I got one hand loose, then the other, and stumbled to the doorway just in time to see Salim draw a knife from his boot. He went for Jabari's ribs. I shouted his name, and he turned half a second early. The blade still sliced his side, but not deep enough. He caught Salim's wrist, slammed it into the wall once, twice, and the knife clattered away. What followed was not elegant, it was honest violence. Two men who knew too much about each other using all of it. Salim fought dirty, fast, precise. Jabari fought like the sea in a storm, heavy, relentless, impossible to charm. Salim landed a blow across Jabari's mouth. Jabari drove him into a stack of shipping crates so hard the wood split. Salim spat blood and laughed. All this for her? Jabari hit him again, and this time there was no calm left in him. "No," he said, "also for every person you thought counted less." That line would have sounded theatrical from anyone else. From him it sounded like a ledger finally being balanced. A man rushed on me from the stairwell, and I did the least elegant thing I had ever done in my life. I hit him with the steel chair. It was not graceful, but it was deeply satisfying. Jabari glanced at me for half a second, saw I was upright, and went back to trying not to get murdered. The fight ended when Salim reached for the drop gun near the office threshold, and Jabari kicked his arm sideways hard enough to break something. Salim fell to one knee, gasping, still trying to turn hatred into strategy. Jabari stood over him, breathing hard, blood at his side, face stripped bare. "You were right about one thing," Salim said through clenched teeth. "Compassion does make men weak." Jabari looked at me then, really looked, as if checking the world had returned me whole enough to matter. Then he looked at Salim and said, "No, it gives them something worth being strong for." Police sirens finally reached the yard below, late as always, dramatic as ever. Salim laughed once at that, bitter and unsurprised. "They'll sell your coast to the next man." "Then I'll be waiting for him too," Jabari replied. The warehouse quieted in the messy way violence always quiets. not cleanly, just in layers. Once Salim was in custody and the surviving workers were separated from his men, Jabari found me beside the broken office doorway. He reached for my face, stopped just short and asked, "Are you hurt?" "Only in the ways you warned me about," I said. He closed his eyes briefly, relief moving through him like something too private to witness. Then he let himself pull me into him. I held him carefully because men who survive by force are often the most breakable in the seconds after they stop using it. We found Temba 2 days later, alive, thin, furious, and too proud to cry until our mother heard his voice over the phone and began making sounds I had never heard from a human being before. He had been moved inland twice and kept for logistics under guard because he knew routes and faces. Salim had intended to decide later whether he was more valuable alive or buried inside paperwork. The charges that followed were real for once, not enough to clean the whole system, but enough to break one's spine in it. My article was eventually published under a different title than the one I pitched. Not tourism, not even corruption. I wrote about coasts that governments remember only when profit comes ashore. I wrote about missing men and invisible cargo, and villages that built their own protection because nobody else arrived in time. I did not write Jabari's name. Some truths survive better without being pinned to paper. Months later, I returned to the old pier where I first saw him. The wind was quieter, the railings still rusted, the sea still pretending innocence while carrying contraband, hope, and history all at once. He was there before I reached the end of the boards. Of course he was. "You've left out the most interesting person in the story," he said. I stood beside him and looked at the water. He would have complained about the editing anyway. That almost smile returned. It had become one of my favorite things, which was inconvenient because it meant I was in deep enough to drown. "I still do not approve of your investigative methods," he said. "I still do not approve of your smuggling empire," I answered. He turned then, eyes softer than the first day, though no less dangerous. "That sounds almost like a fiction." "It sounds like realism," I said. Then I kissed him before he could ruin the moment by becoming wise again. Below us, boats moved in and out with the tide, some legal, some not, all of them carrying the city toward another complicated dawn. I once believed love was supposed to make things simpler. I know better now. Sometimes love arrives where law has failed and asks whether you can live with the shape of another person's darkness. Sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes the answer is a coastline, a storm, a missing brother returned, and a man standing on a broken pier waiting for you to decide. That was how Jabari stopped being the story I was investigating and became the one I chose to stay inside. The rest belongs to the sea. And the sea, I have learned, keeps its best secrets only until love gives them a reason to surface. Thank you for listening. Tell me, which African country would you like the next mafia story to be based in and why? Drop your answers in the comments and I will take it from there. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere in Africa, another story is already unfolding.